A king forces his wife to hire his pregnant mistress as her personal attendant. She faints from the humiliation. He doesn't flinch. This actually happened, and it gets so much worse. By the time Charles II of England died, he'd infected an entire royal court with disease, fathered at least 14 bastards, and accidentally triggered a rebellion that got his own son's head hacked off with 5 blows of an axe. And the craziest part, he did it all with a smile. Buckle up. This is going to be dark. If this video gets demonetized, you'll know why. But someone needs to tell you what really went down in the palace of the merry monarch. Hit subscribe, because this rabbit hole goes deep. First, you need to understand how Charles became this. January 30th, 1649. Charles is 18 years old. He's forced to watch as his father, the King of England, is dragged to a scaffold and beheaded in public. The executioner holds up his father's severed head and screams, "Behold the head of a traitor!" Charles runs. For 11 years, he's hunted like an animal across Europe. He's so poor, he's wearing the same clothes for months. He watches his family scattered, his mother begging for scraps from foreign courts, his siblings traumatized. He nearly dies multiple times. But here's what breaks him. He realizes he has zero control over anything. His father tried to control everything with rigid morality and religion, and they cut his head off for it. So when Charles finally reclaims the throne in 1660, he makes a decision. He will control nothing. He will indulge everything. And consequences, those are for other people to worry about. The Puritans had banned theatre, dancing, Christmas. Charles brought it all back, plus orgies, public mistresses, and scandal that would make modern tabloids look tame. He became addicted to pleasure, and his drug of choice, women. But we're not talking about a few discreet affairs here. Charles turned infidelity into a full-time job. Picture this. You're at Whitehall Palace. You turn a corner, and there's Barbara Villiers, the king's chief mistress, screaming at the queen. Next hallway, Louise de Querouaille, a literal French spy, whispering state secrets she learned in the king's bed. Third corridor, Nell Gwynn, a former prostitute turned royal mistress, throwing oranges at courtiers for fun. This wasn't the court. It was a reality TV show written by Satan himself. And Charles, he's using secret passages built into the palace walls to sneak between their bedrooms. Sometimes multiple women in one night. The man had a rotation schedule. But wait, it gets darker. Charles didn't just have mistresses. He ranked them. He gave them official positions, salaries, apartments. He created a hierarchy of side chicks, and they all knew about each other. They had to watch each other succeed or fail, based on who could keep the king's attention longest. It was The Bachelor, except the losers didn't go home. They stayed at court and had to watch the winner gloat every single day. Now let's talk about Catherine of Braganza, Charles's actual wife, a Portuguese princess who probably thought she was getting a fairy tale. She arrives in England, doesn't speak English, and within days, Charles drops the bomb. "Hey, so Barbara Villiers, you know, my pregnant mistress. Yeah, she's going to be your lady of the bedchamber now." For those who don't know 17th century etiquette, that means Catherine would have to be dressed, undressed, and attended to daily by the woman who was screwing her husband. The woman would be in her bedroom every single day. Catherine literally fainted. When she woke up, she begged Charles not to do this. He refused. And here's the twist. The other ladies at court threatened to quit if Catherine didn't accept Barbara. Charles had poisoned the entire court against his own wife, so Catherine had no choice. She had to smile and accept her husband's pregnant mistress into her inner circle. But it gets so much worse. Catherine suffers miscarriage after miscarriage. She's desperate for a child. Meanwhile, Charles is proving his fertility with mistress after mistress. Children everywhere, none of them hers. The court whispers that maybe she's the problem. Maybe the Queen is barren. Imagine that psychological torture, watching your husband father child after child with other women while you fail over and over. And you can't leave. You can't divorce. You're trapped. Now back to the mistresses, because their stories get wild. Barbara Villiers wasn't just sleeping with Charles. Historians have evidence she was also sleeping with a rope dancer, yes, an acrobat, multiple courtiers, and possibly a playwright. She'd invite men to her apartments while Charles was in the next room. And Charles knew. He was so obsessed with her, he didn't care. She had 5 of Charles's children, or so she claimed. DNA testing didn't exist, so who really knows? Charles acknowledged them anyway and made them all dukes and duchesses. Then there's Louise de Querouaille, literally sent by the King of France as a honeypot. Her job was to sleep with Charles and influence English foreign policy toward France. And it worked. Charles started making decisions that benefited France, all because he was thinking with the wrong head. But my favorite, Nell Gwyn. This woman came from nothing, sold oranges outside theaters, became an actress, which was basically synonymous with prostitute back then, caught Charles's eye and became his most beloved mistress. Why? Because she was hilarious. She once held a baby, Charles's son, out a window and threatened to drop him unless Charles gave him a title. Charles, laughing, immediately made the boy the Duke of St. Albans. Another time, she ran up a $5,000 debt, millions in today's money. And when creditors came knocking, she told Charles, and he just paid it, because she made him laugh. Now let's count the damage. 14 acknowledged illegitimate children. 14. But historians suspect there were more, possibly dozens, who were never acknowledged because their mothers weren't important enough. These children grew up in a nightmare. They had royal blood, royal titles, lived in palaces, but could never inherit the throne. They were princes and princesses in everything but name. And this created a ticking time bomb. The Duke of Monmouth, Charles's eldest bastard, grew up believing he should be king. When Charles's brother, a Catholic, was about to inherit instead, Monmouth led a rebellion. He raised an army. He declared himself the rightful king. He lost. They captured him and dragged him to the scaffold. The executioner was drunk or nervous, nobody knows which. The first blow of the axe didn't kill Monmouth, neither did the second, or the third, or the fourth. After 5 blows, his head still wasn't fully severed. The executioner had to pull out a knife and finish sawing through his neck, while Monmouth was possibly still alive. This was Charles's son, a direct result of his sexual addiction. And we haven't even gotten to the STDs. 17th century England didn't have antibiotics. They barely understood hygiene. Venereal diseases spread through Charles's court like wildfire. Charles himself showed symptoms throughout his life: fevers, sores, constant medical treatments with mercury, which was worse than the disease. His doctor's records describe treatments for the French disease, that's syphilis, and it spread. His mistresses had other lovers. Those lovers had wives. Those wives had children. You could trace disease outbreaks through the aristocracy like a family tree. And Charles was patient zero. People were dying, going mad from untreated syphilis. And nobody talked about it openly because you couldn't accuse the king of being a walking biohazard. February the 2nd, 1685. Charles wakes up and can barely speak. He's had a stroke. At only 54 years old, his body has given up. What follows is 5 days of medieval medical torture. They bleed him, blister his skin, force feed him antimony, literal poison. He's in agony. And in his final hours, surrounded by his illegitimate children, he says, "Let not poor Nelly starve, not his wife, not his kingdom, his mistress." Then comes the ultimate irony. Charles dies without a legitimate heir. All that sex, all those children, 14 royal bastards, and none of them can inherit. The crown passes to his Catholic brother James, which immediately triggers the Glorious Revolution and nearly destroys England. Constitutional crisis, political chaos, all because Charles spent 25 years thinking with his pants instead of his crown. But here's the final kick in the teeth. His mistresses immediately started fighting over his money. His illegitimate children plotted against each other for titles. And Catherine, his faithful wife, who suffered through decades of humiliation, was left with nothing but debt and trauma. So yeah, the Merry Monarch, 12 official mistresses, 14 bastards, one wife destroyed, an entire court infected, a son executed, and a kingdom left in flames. Charles II didn't just have a sex addiction, he turned it into a political weapon, a public spectacle, and ultimately, England's biggest disaster. Drop a comment. Which historical figure's dark secrets should we expose next? And remember, they don't teach you this in history class.
Hit subscribe to History's Dark Ledger. We uncover the side of history they never taught you because they couldn't.